Hello, everyone. Welcome to the official podcast of the number one source for information on the Boston Red Sox farm system on the web. This is the SoxProspects.com podcast. It's episode number 130. Thank you for listening. My name is Chris Hatfield. I am the executive editor of SoxProspects.com, coming to you from the new and improved Sox Prospects Mid-Atlantic offices here in our nation's capital. Joining me, as always, is our director of scouting, Ian Kundle. Ian, it's September the 10th. As we record this, the minor league season the regular season is over. We are in the playoffs. Things are starting to wind down in the minors, focusing more on the major league team at this point, at least for me. I don't know about how you kind of wind up feeling around this time. It's kind of an interesting time for some look back on the year. This isn't our wrap-up episode or anything, but it's interesting how it just kind of, makes your thoughts fall into place on how the season has gone.
It is, and it's interesting how quick it kind of goes by.
Yeah.
Like, I kind of felt like it just started, but obviously here we are. We've got minor league seasons over except for one affiliate. Major league season's approaching the end. It's went by quick, but I guess it's a time, not necessarily the final time we'll reflect upon the season, but it's a good time to discuss the last couple of weeks of the season.
Yeah, it feels like it was only like 6 months ago that we were in Fort Myers for spring training.
I think it was 6 months ago.
Oh.
So your math is good.
Oh, good. Cool. Speaking of Fort Myers, really quickly, if we have any listeners down in Florida, just know that we're thinking of you. Stay safe, everybody. Hopefully if we can provide a little bit of a, quick distraction from the hurricane, from Irma that's coming through there. I've got family in St. Petersburg that did not evacuate. They're not that close to the coast, and their house is concrete, so it's not a total bonehead move or anything. But my wife and I are both kind of stressed out about the situation. But know that we're thinking of you, everybody down there, and we're going to get to our housekeeping, but I think it's going to be a little quick this episode. I should mention the SoxProspects.com annual drive. It's a thing. If this isn't your first episode listening to the podcast, you know what it is. If you want to give, that's awesome, and we really appreciate it. I'm not going to pretend that, there aren't some people who maybe could use the money right now in Texas and in Florida. So, give to those causes before you give to our humble little podcast. Frankly, I know it's kind of a statement against interest, but I'm a realist. What can I tell you? Also, we want to thank our patrons from patreon.com/SoxProspects. Our $5 patrons are Sox Signatures, Cody Pimento, Lendell Martin, Kirby Miller, Gerardo Ian Tosca, Kyle Costigan, Tyler Woodrawall, Jeff Traynor, David Nardone, Tim Harding, Tim Ware, Scott Klebe, Hurricanes 1, Bill Stanton, and Teb Kendall. We love getting your emails, so send those to podcast@soxprospects.com. That is a better way to send in your questions, because if you send them through Twitter, sometimes we forget about them and may go a couple episodes before answering them. But we're going to get to a couple of Twitter ones today. So speaking of Twitter, follow the site's account @SoxProspects. I'm @SP Chris Hatfield, and Ian is @Ian Kundle. That's IANCUNDALL. And make sure you're following our news page @news.soxprospects.com on the web. Don't assume because the minor league season is pretty much over that we're going to be stopping our content on there. Far from it. So make sure you're checking that out. I guess a programming note while I'm thinking of it with the podcast. With the season wrapping up, we've got a couple of thoughts for interviews that we've wanted to do that we're going to try and pursue a little bit more now from people both within and without the organization. So we're going to get working on that. And, we're definitely going to continue producing content. We're not going to go as silent as we have in the past, I don't think. Maybe get to some more of our theoretical questions that we've gotten, for example. So make sure you keep it here. We're going to have, I think, at least maybe a half episode that comes out next week that we're going to record today. So we're going to record that. That's going to come out Friday, probably somewhere around there. It'll be a shorter episode, but more content coming at you really quick. Ian, should we jump right into the news, my friend?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, well, news, first and foremost, we mentioned the minor league season is over. 2 Red Sox affiliates made the playoffs. The first was the Dominican Summer League Red Sox, which the fact that that team made the playoffs is kind of incredible, given that, well, I guess on the one hand, it's the combination of players that once were spread between 2 teams that succeeded. So in that sense, I guess it's maybe not that crazy. But that said, they did have some older guys on the team, so and there's that. But at the same time, the Red Sox couldn't sign anybody last year, is the point I was getting to. So good season for those guys. They did get some reinforcements with the July 2 signings. The Red Sox signed a few older guys that it's kind of funny in the game 1 of the playoffs in the I think it's the semifinals, or maybe it's the quarterfinals. In game 1, the Red Sox roster featured, like the lineup featured 3 guys that weren't on the team to start the year. The starting pitcher was a guy who wasn't on the team to start the year. It was just very interesting. Not something we're used to seeing in the Dominican Summer League. The Red Sox wound up losing their opening round series, so they were eliminated. But still alive is the Greenville Drive. The Drive won the South Atlantic League Southern Division title in the first half, and they just won their series 2-1 against, I am blanking, Ian, help me. Do you remember who they beat?
Charleston,
and Charleston is the Yankees affiliate. I should have remembered that. So the Greenville Drive, technically it's called winning the Southern Division Championship. They move on now to starting on Monday the 11th, which is probably when you're going to be listening to this. They'll be facing off against Kannapolis in the South Atlantic League Championship. The Intimidators, the Kannapolis Intimidators are the White Sox Class A affiliate. We've got a follower on Twitter / contributor to the forums on Sox Prospects, Wide World of Sport, who made the interesting point that Greenville, and this is the reason you have first half and second half championships in A-ball, is they've basically had 2 entirely different rotations this year. Their rotation. Well, I'll bring up their roster to start the year, the 2016 SB. Okay, so the Greenville Drive rotation to start the year. Sean Anderson, promoted to Salem after a month. And traded.
Yeah, can't forget that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm just saying, but yeah, and traded to the Giants. Darwinzon Hernandez, who's the one guy who's been there all year. Mike Schwarin, Salem. Logan Boyd, Salem. Jay Groom, who made 1 start and then was out for the rest of the first half and is now in the rotation. And then they had guys there like Daniel Gonzalez, who's there, who was a piggyback starter. Hildemar Waquena, who I think we listed as a piggyback starter, but was actually in a true bullpen role. And their entire bullpen almost is different now, too, because they're all either traded or in Salem, too. I think the only guys that are still there are Hunter Smith and Robbie Sexton. Yeah, I know, Fifi.
Yeah, because I saw a lot of these guys were in Lowell at some point, especially in the bullpen.
That are there now.
Yeah,
so that gets us to the current pitching staff of the not the projected rosters. The current pitching staff, the 3 starters in that series were Darwinzon Hernandez, Brian Mata, and Hildemar Waquena. And then the bullpen is Daniel Gonzalez, Jonathan Diaz, although those guys are probably starters now in this series. Robbie Sexton, who was an original drive for this year, Hunter Smith, and then 4 guys who either joined the drive late or were in Lowell in Algenis Martinez, Juan Florentino, Yohan Martinez, who's basically their stopper now, and Brendan Nail, who we should briefly mention, Ian. We kind of dismissed Brendan Nail the last episode of the podcast because we didn't know anything about him, but it turns out he got $125,000 to sign, which is the most you can give a guy without him counting towards the signing bonus cap. And you've heard some interesting stuff about him.
Yeah, there were a couple other teams actually that were interested in him, and he was up to 94 on the Cape League. Mm-hmm. So our scouting report that is not, I didn't put together, is not very accurate. But yeah, he apparently throws decently hard for a small lefty, so he's someone we'll have to get a look at.
Basically what happens is when a guy goes to the Cape League, if he wasn't drafted, he can sign. That actually happened while I was working in the athletic department at Brown. Our ace, who was a junior, went to the Cape and impressed the Diamondbacks enough that he basically got like seventh round money. This was pre-signing bonus cap era.
Yeah, Nail was actually really good on the Cape. I have stats right here. He was through 26 innings, 32 strikeouts, 14 walks, only allowed 15 hits, and had a 1.03 ERA.
There you go.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, so Brendan Nail, who signed out of, he was playing at Western Carolina.
He was a senior, too. Wow.
Was he?
No, it said senior, but maybe he was like a redshirt junior.
Well, he was probably a redshirt junior because those guys get listed as seniors.
I was going to say, because if he was a straight senior, that's hard to believe he wasn't drafted. But yeah, he was a junior. He was a redshirt junior.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because if he was a senior, he wouldn't.
So he did have some leverage. He could have gone back to school.
He would have been playing on the Cape if he was a senior.
Yeah, he could have. He had some leverage, and he had other teams interested, so he got a pretty good bonus. I mean, after the 10th round, they only gave like 5 guys more than 125K or something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. So Greenville Drive, Ian. Some other guys. We'll talk about the call-ups from the Gulf Coast League. As a matter of fact, we'll probably transition into those from this topic. Sorry, cat is scratching the rug. But yeah, I mean, the lineup too is a lot different. Roldani Baldwin at catcher and Bobby Dahlbeck at third base are probably the biggest names in the lineup. Brett Netzer, this year's 3rd round draft pick, at second base. Santiago Espinal at short, who was named the team's MVP. But other than that, not exactly the most. It's kind of a little bit of a nondescript lineup.
Well, they got a lot of guys on the DL. I mean, C.J. Chatham, who was the opening day shortstop. Or no, he wasn't the opening day shortstop. Actually, he was supposed to be, but he got hurt in spring training. Right. He only played, a third of it, or 1 inning this year or something, or 3 innings. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then Lorenzo Cedrola's on the DL. Tyler Hill's on the temporary inactive list, it looks like. So,
well, he's on the TIA, but he's probably hurt. I think they probably just put him on the TIA so they could bring him back quicker.
True. Yeah.
I don't know what the reason would be, but he hadn't played the last 6 or 7 games before the end of the regular season. So
gotcha. Because he was one of their better hitters this year, I think.
Yeah, I mean he would have been. Well, and what winds up happening is they've got Tucker Tubbs starting at first base, but they had a hole in left field. Basically, their outfield for this series has been Jagger Rusconi at center field, which was a move that happened this year. Basically, because at this point you've got Netzer at second there, and you've got Kervin Suarez coming up behind him, which we'll talk about in a minute. So it looks like Rusconi is basically moving to center field, although he has been playing a little bit of second base. Right field has been Yohan Ibar, who got called up from Lowell, basically to keep getting him at bats is my kind of take on it.
Plus, I mean, they don't have any outfielders though.
Well, they had Ryan Scott still. I mean, Ryan Scott's been
still playing every day. But like they're playing Ibar and Pedro Castellanos.
And that's the thing. Pedro Castellanos, who is I think second in the Gulf Coast League in hitting or something. He was second in the league in batting average last I checked. Castellanos is playing left field for them. He has played nothing but first base this year. He had played some outfield in the Dominican Summer League, and Ian, we agree he's not an outfielder.
No, he's like 6'4", 6'5", like 2 something. He's not an outfielder.
Well, someone's then going to say, well, Aaron Judge, but it's just the actions out there aren't good.
No, I mean, he's not very athletic. And this is with Castellanos, the thing that we got to put in mind is it seems like something's changed since spring training.
Well, you got to see him at Instructs.
Yeah, because in spring training, like we talked about it, I think last episode, and it's been talked about on the forum, and there's video of it too. His swing is just very long. There's not a lot of bat speed. There wasn't a lot there. And I think it was in an Alex Spear article discussing him. He had some quotes from Ben Crockett about how short to the ball he was, how his swing was much better. So
it might have been Chris Smith at Mass Live.
It might have been. It was someone. There was some article with quotes from Ben Crockett about it. So he's someone that we're going to have to see again because obviously we haven't seen him since spring training, and
I remember
they're showing what he was. So
those quotes came out, and then someone found some video that Eric Longenhagen at Fangraphs had put online, and because there was a debate going, it was like our report said he has a long swing. Ben Crockett's saying he has a short swing, and then this video happened to come out, not come out. I mean, it had been out, but someone found it and posted it in the forum, and it was like, nope, that's a really long swing.
Yeah, because it was from spring training this
Right.
year, so something's changed clearly. Because from what I've seen from him in the past, I mean, he's just more physical than a lot of his peers, which I think is something he still probably is. But I mean, based on he didn't strike out at all, and so he's someone I'm interested to get another look at. Though, again, GCL statistics we should take a little bit with a grain of salt.
Yeah, just to say it, I don't know if I've said it recently. I mean, the GCL, you're playing the same 3 teams over and over again,
especially for the Red Sox. Yeah,
it's the Red Sox play the Twins, the Orioles, and the Rays, and that's it. So if the pitching staff on one of those teams is terrible, that's going to goose the hell out of your numbers. It's even more so with the pitchers who. There have been years, the year that like Logan Allen and Roniel Raudes and Anderson Espinoza were all down there, and the pitching staff was like the greatest pitching staff ever. When you looked at the game logs for those guys, like some of them had 10 starts and 7 of them were against the same team, just with the way the schedule wound up going. Because I think they basically do home and homes and rotate. So the way the schedule can wind up, especially when you have rainouts and things like that, you just face the same team or same 2 teams a lot.
Well, if you think about it, it's not just the regular season. I mean, the guys who stay back at extended are playing those same 3 teams through all of extended and all of spring training. You know what I mean? Right. So you're seeing the same 3 teams from March until the end of the season, basically, if you stay in the complex the entire time.
That's true. Through the fall instructional league, too.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of fall instructional league references already. I mean, so go Greenville Drive. We got a question. An email question that I think makes sense to get to now rather than waiting. This is from RS Gill 00, and he says 2 players for the Drive, Daniel Gonzalez and Hildemaro Requena, have had very good seasons. Gonzalez isn't ranked in the top 60, and Requena sits at 51. Obviously, they have had surprising seasons. But do either of these players look like potential major leaguers? Ian, having seen both of them more than I have, your take. I guess maybe a very brief scouting report on both, and then kind of your take.
I guess we'll start with Gonzalez. He's huge. He's like 6'5", 6'6", like 230, but he also throws like 85, 87. So it's tough. I mean, there just isn't the velocity. But he throws strikes, and he can spin a breaking ball, even though it's really slow. But it's just like it's got a lot of depth, or not depth. It's just got a lot of length, and he obviously had a great success with it this year. And it's one of those things that I think when you're a pitcher who can throw strikes with your fastball and you can spin a breaking ball, you're going to have success in the low minors. But there aren't very many right-handed pitchers who top out in the mid 80s who make it into the high minors and stick around there for a while. So he's someone who I don't see a lot of upside with. Yeah,
Gonzalez is an interesting guy because if you look at there's the story, even if you haven't seen him pitch, there's the story his numbers tell, and there's the story that like what the organization has done with him tells.
Yeah.
2013 at age 17, he comes out in the Dominican Summer League. Appears in 14 games, only starts 2 of them. He was kind of a piggyback starter and was lights out. I mean, ERA below 1, whip of .58, struck out 42 and walked 3 in 46 and a third, only giving up 24 hits. And you see that and you're just like, oh my God, like, what is this? Comes in the next year and repeats the DSL. So that's your first clue, right? Is that, okay, he didn't even graduate with those numbers. That year has another really good statistical year. The strikeouts go down, only 56 and 72 innings, but, ERA of 2.25, only walked 14 guys, whip of 1.04. Great. And I remember you talking about seeing him in instructs and seeing that body and expecting to see like 97, and instead you see 85.
Yeah, he's someone who looks like they should throw hard, but they just don't.
So then he to 2015 goes to Lowell, does very well there. Last year he split it between Lowell and Greenville. This year he was an up and down guy between Greenville and Salem. He was the guy that went up when Salem needed a spot start and came back down. They don't do that with like Jason Groom. They don't do that with Mike Shawarin. With those guys, when they're up, they're up. When they're not ready to go up, they don't go up.
But he's the type of guy that's going to be useful. I mean, in the low minors,
very useful.
Guys like that.
But it's just like, you look at his numbers this year. I mean, he made 6 appearances in Salem, and in 34 and a third innings, he's got an ERA of 1.31. He has 5 wins in the 6 games, 31 strikeouts to 6 walks. In Greenville, in 23 games, I don't know how many of them were starts, but 82 and a third innings, 3.39 ERA, okay. 82 strikeouts to 24 walks. The K per 9 is still below 1 an inning, just a little below 1 an inning, or it's just about 1 an inning, call it 1 an inning. But, he's not blowing guys away necessarily. The whip in Greenville is 1.08. He had a good year statistically, but then you see the guy, and it's tough sometimes to separate. Look, you can have success even relative to your age. With Gonzalez, you can't say, well, he's old. He's 21. But just the stuff's just not stuff that's going to excel above high A. Even if he somehow has success in Portland, it's not going to play above Portland.
Yeah, he's going to need something to happen like what happened to Edgar Jimenez this year, where he found like an extra grade on his fastball and just learned to be a pitcher.
Well, and even still, that makes him like a AAA org guy. Probably.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's not a lot of upside. Requena, I think he has a little more upside. I've seen him up to like 90, 91 before, but I'm not sure how much projection there is. He's pretty average frame. Fastball, as I said, was like 88, 90, 91. He has some feel for his changeup and a curveball. So I think it's just another case where, if you have feel for 3 pitches and you can throw strikes, you're going to have success in the low minors. But I think there's a little more there with him, I would say, than Gonzalez, and I think that's reflected in our rankings. And he's someone who I would like to get. Last time I saw him was spring training this year, so maybe if the fastball's ticked up, though, I've heard it hasn't. It's more still like 89, 91. Maybe if the fastball takes a tick up a little bit, then there's something there. But I think he's got a little more upside than Gonzalez. So, yeah, he's someone a little more interesting.
Yeah, Requena is an interesting guy, too, in that, just to say his numbers for the year in Greenville, ERA of 1.98. He's looking at the internal voting we have going on. He's probably going to be a SoxProspects.com all-star, as I think we're going to slot him in as a reliever / swingman. Because he started the year, as I mentioned, as a true reliever. And I should probably get his splits. But he started the year in a relief role and just was really lights out, had a great year, and he got moved back into the rotation in late July and made 2, 4, I can just count. So he made 8 starts. So in 24 relief appearances, so let's see. Reliever, 24 relief appearances to start the year. In 49 and a third innings, he struck out 51, walked 17. The whip was 1.30, but I think he got better as the season went on. 3 saves and 4 opportunities. Then as a starter, he entered the rotation, and in 8 starts, 0.59 ERA. Didn't strike out a ton of guys, only 33 strikeouts in 46 innings. But, batting average against was 156. Whip was 0.85. He had a great year statistically. It's going to be interesting to see what carries forward with him. I remember, Ian, when you saw him for the first time in spring training, your reaction wasn't like, oh my God. It wasn't as strong a reaction as you had to say seeing Brian Mata for the first time or seeing a Darwinzon Hernandez for the first time. But you were just kind of like, yeah.
Yeah, he's fine. I would say right now it probably projects like solid organizational arm. Maybe could be like a 4.5, like a swing man or something.
Sure.
But it's, he's still young. He's younger than Gonzalez. And obviously, the numbers, I think it's telling, though, is you were kind of alluding to with Gonzalez that he wasn't a starter the entire year. That, they started him in the bullpen, and then eventually they were like, oh, wait, he's been good enough. I guess we have a need. Let's move him to the rotation. So someone to keep an eye on, but he's not on the tier of those other Greenville guys who dominated in their starts to start in their first round playoff series.
In addition to Castellanos getting the call up to Greenville after the GCL season ended, 4 guys got called up from the Gulf Coast League to Lowell. It's custom. When there are spots available in Lowell, the Red Sox will call a few guys up from the GCL. Sometimes they play, sometimes they don't, but it's kind of a reward for them, basically. for how they played in the GCL, and because they want to see them at that level too. The 4 that got promoted this year were center fielder Cole Brannon, who was the team's second-round pick this year, second baseman Kervin Suarez, third baseman Ever Luis Lozada, and starting pitcher Juan Perez, who I don't believe pitched in Lowell.
No, he did.
Oh, he did. Did he get lit up?
I just looked at his line. 2.1 innings, 8 hits, 8 runs.
Oh, that's not good.
Good for a 30.86 ERA and 3.86 WHIP.
All right, well, that's bad.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the 3 hitters, who we like a lot. They're all ranked.
Especially Ever Luis Lozada. I'm pretty sure someone had him a lot higher than everyone else did in the rankings.
You did, but...
Yeah, I know. That's why I said
it. You're a dick. Lozada, yeah, I mean, Suarez is a guy that you've been on since you saw him at Instructs, I believe, Ian.
Uh-huh.
He was ranked, at least on the sheet, we wound up ranking him, at 44, right ahead of Castellanos, who's at 45. Lozada bows at 55, and I think this is his first time being ranked. Although he's ranked 55, you had him at 50, I had him at 52, so I don't want to say a lot higher.
No.
I'm going to say 2 higher, and Mike had him at 59. So, actually, for that range, I'm going to retract my agreement with your statement and say, no, I think we pretty much all had him right around the same area. So
50 to 59 is kind of different.
No, not at that level.
I mean,
not at that level of the.
I'm not a mathematician, but 50 is lower than 52 and 59. Yes or no?
By lower, do you mean higher?
No, 50. Yeah, whatever, same thing.
Yeah, well, I guess lower.
It's technically lower, but yeah.
Yeah, all right.
Yes, okay, good. We're not semantics people here. Let's
move on.
My computer's turning green, so we're going to have to speed up.
Poison ivy is there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, 3 guys who were intrigued to see in Instructs or spring training, or both. Nice reward for those guys, frankly. Brannon, interesting season, Ian. Didn't really hit for a whole lot of power. We currently have him ranked, I should mention, at 11th in the rankings. We should mention, I'll go ahead and say it, he's been tying with Josh Ockamy the last couple of months, but we've been breaking the tie in favor of Ockamy after the voting happens, which I think is the way to do it. Brannon, we have his stats with Lowell, unfortunately, on the front page, but it's kind of funny. He hit for pretty much no power in the GCL in 39 games, 168 plate appearances. He had 2 extra base hits, both doubles. For a guy with plus power, I found that very surprising. But then, of course...
No. Brandon's not a power guy. He's a speed guy.
Oh, I know, but I'm just... Yeah, I mean, but that said, 2 in 168 plate appearances for a guy who's got a plus... Did I say plus power? I meant plus,
you meant
plus run.
Speed.
Plus speed. Sorry.
He doesn't have a lot of power.
You would think he would run into a few more extra base hits, but then, of course, in his 3-game sample in Lowell, he hit a triple. So that was his 1 hit and 9 at-bats. So he walked a lot, which was interesting. I wonder if part of it is just kind of learning what pitches he can square up. And then Suarez and Lozada both also had pretty good statistical seasons in the Gulf Coast League. You want to say anything about either of them?
No, they're just small Latin American middle infielders, and yeah, we'll see. The Red Sox are pretty good at finding those guys, especially to trade. So we could see they're good names to know, especially come trade deadline season next year.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the Red Sox handle, say, shortstop in A-ball next year. Because, I mean, you would like C.J. Chatham to go to Salem.
I think you just have to put him in Salem, even if you can't send him back to Greenville.
But then, like, Santiago Espinal had a decent year in Greenville.
Yeah.
What does he do? I mean, I think what probably happens is Espinal goes to Salem to start. I think you maybe put Chatham in Greenville for a month, if that. And before you give him a bump.
I think you have to start him in Salem.
We could talk about that later, but it's just interesting how shortstops, kind of shaking out, and then the infield spots at those levels. They're starting to build a little bit of depth there, so that's good to see.
Yeah.
It's good to see. I think
the one other transaction we should probably mention is that Bryce Brentz didn't get called up to the majors.
Well, I meant to do September call-ups next before we did rankings, so You're right. Let's start with... For the September call-ups, we're not going to mention everyone that got called up.
I think Brent's the only thing that needs to be discussed.
Well, the guys, we'll just put it this way. The players that were on the 40-man roster and healthy that did not get called up, were as follows: Brian Johnson, Henry Owens, Ben Taylor, and Kyle Martin was designated for assignment to make room to activate Carson Smith off of the 60-day DL. So that means no Bryce Brentz, no Jalen Beeks, which I think we had kind of realized as in the days leading up was probably not going to happen.
Yeah, they probably won't. He's not going to the AFL, is he?
No.
Yeah, they probably want to shut him down innings.
He's probably well, I mean, his innings are actually not that far ahead of where he was last year. They probably could have used him in the bullpen easily, but
they just don't have a spot.
Fair enough. Right, exactly. Especially where I didn't think they were going to call up Roenis Elias. When they called up Elias as one of the first September call-ups, that's when I kind of realized, okay, Beeks isn't happening.
Yeah.
Because that's 3 lefties in the bullpen for them right now with Abad and Scott.
Yeah.
Going through those guys, Ian, I mean, so Taylor was hurt. He made 3 appearances to end the year. First on rehab, and then they activated him for reasons that confounded me. That I'll get into in a minute. I get why they're not calling him up because he's hurt or he's just coming off of an injury. Fine, don't call him up. Johnson and Owens, getting them ready for the Arizona Fall League. Velasquez, it really looks like Velasquez has passed Brian Johnson at this point in terms of guy who they maybe, well, let's put it this way. Guy who they've got in the bullpen right now who if someone got hurt, they would probably put in the rotation. I think they feel more comfortable with Velasquez for that role, given the issues that Johnson has had with his shoulder, given any number of reasons. Velasquez, they're clearly more comfortable doing that with because that's who they called up to do that with. Owens was the only guy who we knew wasn't going to get called up. Owens is still working on his new arm slot. He's going to the Arizona Fall League. And that leaves Brentz, who I really thought they were going to call up. I kind of get why they didn't. Getting it doesn't mean I agree with it. To me, Ben Taylor, hey, he had a great season. He really broke through with being a guy who they put on the 40-man roster, made the opening day roster, pitched like a pretty good middle reliever. That's what he is. The decision to bring him back at the end of the year to make 3 appearances in Pawtucket, when you could have put him on the 60-day DL and added Bryce Brentz to the roster, confounds me. I don't get it. I think it's crazy. Am I overreacting? And this is not to say that I think Bryce Brentz would have been the savior for a team that, yes, has been hurting in terms of power, and that's the one thing that we know Brentz does have. But it seemed like such an easy move to make with no downside, Ian.
I would agree with you, but I think what it came down to is that the organization made the determination that that Bryce Brentz wasn't going to make the playoff roster, and Chris Young is a lock, and they need to get Chris Young right for the playoffs. Because as we kind of talked about, I think it was in the last episode, he's been terrible against left-handers this year. I think he has like 4 RBIs the entire year, and he's hitting under 200. But they continue to throw him out there against lefties. And they need to get him at bats. And they also have Sam Travis on the roster already who can pinch hit against lefties. And so I think they just made the determination that, Brentz is a minor league free agent. I'm guessing he's not in their plans for next year. So they'd rather give the at bats to someone like Travis, who potentially could be in the plans for next year, or Chris Young, who is in the plans for this year. And while I don't necessarily agree with the move, I think Brentz could have helped this team, even if it was only in 20 or 30 at bats this September. That's the determination they made, and that's what they're Dabrowski at least he came out and said it. We told him he wasn't what we were looking for. So yeah, it kind of is what it is. But I think it's probably also the end of Bryce Brentz's Red Sox career.
It's it's funny putting it that way is just it seems like you're like breaking up with someone or like turning down they're asking you out. You're not what I'm looking for.
Bryce Brentz has been in our lives for like 8 years.
Yes. Well, it's funny when because Michael Chavis hit 30 home runs this year, and he was the first since Ryan LaVarnway and Bryce Brentz did it in 2011, I think it was. And it was just
he did it in 2011. Jesus. He's been I was still in college when Bryce Brentz was drafted.
I don't get the harm in adding him to the roster. I'm inclined to agree with you. In theory, there's a period before he would become a free agent. Brentz becomes a free agent 5 days after the World Series ends.
Mm-hmm.
In theory, the Red Sox could add him to the 40-man roster before then and retain him for next year.
I just don't see it.
I think that there is a gap between we like you to the degree we want to add you to the 40-man roster now and play you in September, and we like you enough to add you to the 40-man roster so that we bring you in to spring training next year.
Mm-hmm.
There's a gap there. I don't think it's a very big gap, and I think it's highly unlikely that that's where the Red Sox sit right now.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, if you felt that the latter way about Brentz, why not just add him now? I mean, I'll credit you with pointing out in your scouting scratch, Ian, to me, because I hadn't realized that Sam Travis, despite his struggles at the plate this year, has hit lefties very well.
Yeah, that's one thing he's always done consistently, and he's obviously, as we know, he's had his struggles. But
yeah, he's struggled this year, but you know what? Okay, that kind of added a piece to maybe that's part of why they didn't call up Brentz. I get that now, but still, like, you really couldn't find a spot for Brentz, and I think the other considerations are as follows. One, he's not a very good defensive outfielder.
That's an understatement.
He's not good out there.
He's well below average. He's like a 35 defender.
Right. His best role in the Red Sox lineup is as a DH. We read
or
that
pinch hitter. Yeah.
Well, right. Well, I meant in the starting lineup.
Oh, yeah.
As a pinch hitter down the stretch is how you would have used him.
Yeah.
We read that they were working him out at first base this year, and this is just entirely conjecture on my part. I don't think he looked good there either, because if he looked any good at first base, he would have played it in a game in Pawtucket. Jansen Whitty was getting starts at first base down the stretch, and he's a AAA org guy. Brentz didn't start at all at first base. They clearly have no inclination of playing him at first base in the majors. I hope that's not just because Travis is there, because Brent's just the comparison that I had made, I think, here as well. But it's just like, is he Brandon Moss 2.0 where he figures it out at age 30?
I mean, I think he'll go somewhere. He'll get a lot of interest, I would guess, in the offseason. And I would not be surprised at all if he went somewhere and hit like 15 home runs next year as like a bench, in like a DH or like a platoon role.
DH, platoon, left fielder.
Yeah, I mean, he's not like, there's not a lot of upside or anything. Like, we're not talking about, he's not like a huge loss. It's just, he seems like a useful player. And, I don't necessarily like kind of like giving those guys away or losing them for nothing.
I don't see the downside.
Yeah.
The downside is you lose him in the spring for the same thing you lost him for now, which is nothing.
Or in the offseason, you DFA him.
Yeah, you DFA him later. Like, well, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if they're going to try and re-sign him. I mean, I'm clearly not.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just, I think the only way I could have understood it a little bit in terms of the roster construction, because I think that was another thing they cited. It was just they didn't have anyone to like remove from the 40-man roster. Was that the Ben Taylor thing? If you're going to do that and Ben Taylor's healthy, then why don't you call him up? If you're not going to call him up, then you might as well do what you were saying and put him on the 60-day DL.
Right.
So
that was the other problem I had, that there wasn't room on the 40-man roster is a total crock. There absolutely was room on the 40-man roster.
Or you could have just put David Price on the 60-day DL and act, because if he's going to come back, it's not going to be until after the 21st of September. So you could have got like 3 weeks to look at Brentz.
Well, maybe not, because he just threw a 2-inning simulated game. He's going to go 3 innings on Wednesday. And
so that would put him on track like right around the 21st.
Well, no, because Wednesday's the 13th, right?
Yeah, but they're not going to.
Well, no, because they're saying they might activate him as a relief pitcher.
Oh, okay, I missed that part.
Yeah, so they're saying they want to get him up to 3 innings, stretched out to 3 innings no matter what.
Gotcha.
And they're going to evaluate then whether to bring him back as a relief pitcher or to continue trying to stretch him up. Because here's the thing, right? You've got a good thing going in the rotation right now. Your playoff rotation.
Fister. I'm pretty sure we crushed Doug Fister on one of the episodes.
Your playoff rotation is Chris Sale. Right now, your rotation is probably Sale, Pomerantz,
Fister. It would be
Porcello.
I can't see them. Yeah,
like they can't. They're not going to move Porcello to the bullpen to start
No.
Rodriguez. are you really that eager to rush David Price back to? I mean, all of those guys except for maybe Porcello have been really good. And maybe you work Price in at the major league level in a long relief role that stretches him out, where if he is, Rays era David Price, okay, yeah, we can punt someone to the bullpen, sure. But, yeah, I see where they're coming from, where, are they going to run out of time here? So,
yeah.
The thing is, if you're going to try and get him up on the 15th, then, yeah, you shouldn't have put him on the 60-day DL because you're costing yourself
2 appearances
6 days.
1 appearance, yeah.
6 days, that's a lot of time when we're talking the amount of time they're working with here. But Ben Taylor going to the 60-day DL instead of making 3 appearances in Pawtucket is one. There are guys, Roenis Elias has an option left. I get that. He's starting depth for next year. Fine. But I just, I don't know, man. It's you could have made room. Don't say that you couldn't make room. So
yeah, it's done now, so there's nothing really
trading for Rajai Davis might have taken his roster spot too.
And, that was a necessary move, though.
It was. Oh, it absolutely was. And it's an upgrade.
A speed guy. So.
It's an upgrade. It's an absolute upgrade. So, anyway, I won't be able to belabor the point. I think this is another one the Red Sox got wrong. It's not a catastrophic thing they got wrong, but I think they got it wrong. Okay. I think that's all the news, Ian.
Yes, now we can move to your rankings.
Can we now? Bryce Brentz is ranked in the SoxProspects.com rankings, and actually he was one of the biggest movers this month. He moved up to number 22. Last month he was 36, and the month before that, the month before that he was 41. So he has kind of catapulted up the rankings, but the September rankings are up. Just to go down, I guess, the top 10. Rafael Devers, for the last time, bows at number 1. He is going to graduate at the end of the season.
No.
So no more Andrew Benintendi-esque, not really a prospect guy topping the prospect rankings. Devers will be gone. He's followed by number 2, Jay Groom. Number 3 was Michael Chavis. Number 4, Sam Travis. Number 5, Brian Mata. Number 6, Tanner Houck. Number 7, Daniel Flores. None of those changed from last month. And we all had the same top 7 guys in the top 7. Last month we had them all ranked the same. This month I kind of swapped some guys around. We could talk about that a little bit, Ian, maybe. But just to round out the top 10, at number 8 was Mike Shawarin, who was number 8 last month. Actually, the top 10 didn't change. Number 9 was Jalen Beeks, and number 10 was Josh Ockamy. No changes in the top 10. I had some internal debate, Ian, about the 4, 5, 6 tier, which I think we all kind of agreed was a tier at the very least of some sort. I ranked them Houck, Mata, Travis. To me, with the way Travis hit in AAA this year, and last year as well, frankly, in a very limited sample size before he tore his ACL, I worry about the power playing enough at the major league level for him to be a legitimate starting first baseman on a first division team. Whereas Houck, I think even if it doesn't work as a starter, can be a late inning reliever for you. And Mata, just the promise. Again, it's a tough apples to oranges comparison, and maybe this is time to get to the question you got, and we'll expand a little bit upon it in the context of some other guys. It's tough to compare, but just there's a lot of promise there. It's a potential future starting pitcher, which is not something the system has a lot of. I just value those 2 guys more than I value Travis right now. What were your thoughts there? Was anything close for you at all in that, or did you give any thought to switching guys around?
I considered it, but I think I told you I would have preferred to not have a number 4 prospect and leave it blank and then just go to 5 because there wasn't a clear answer there. And then I would expand that tier you said to include Daniel Flores, even though because I think he could have the most upside of any of those 4
Very
guys.
true.
He probably does have the most upside, frankly, of those
Good
4
point.
guys.
Good point.
But at the end of the day, Travis might not. We need to see the power, but he's big league ready. And for that was enough for me to take, because I think Mata is projections a starter, but I'm just not sure how much long-term upside necessarily. Like, I'm not sure he's like a 2. I think he's more like could be like a low-end 3, number 4 type, unless the stuff like, but that's as is. Like, if the stuff continues to improve, that could change. And I mean, he's made significant strides already, so we'll see. And then with Houck, I actually wrote about him earlier today I was writing about him, and I'm still not sold he's a starter. And nothing I've seen him 4 times now, has changed that for me. And so if you got a guy who might be a bullpen arm, then an 18-year-old in low A, I just decided at this point I'll go with the security of someone like Travis still, with the floor of like a bench big leaguer. At this point, it's not exactly a great ringing endorsement, but yeah, it was close though. I think I had 4, 5, 6, and 7 were all right next to each other.
Yeah,
for me.
Yeah, I think all that makes a whole lot of sense. Even though I ranked them differently this month, I think the words I even used were, you guys had them ranked this way, that's how the voting worked. I have zero problem with it. No need to even discuss it.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, the thing that is with the Travis, I mean, if you look at what the Red Sox did this year, they went out and got Mitch Moreland on a 1-year deal. And I think part of that was the hope that Sam Travis would step up and become the starting first baseman for next year. And he definitely didn't do that. He didn't come close to doing that. So, you just look at that and it's like, okay, so what's the team going to do now? Are they going to go get another guy? I mean, I guess you've got Hanley Ramirez. I mean, Hanley Ramirez DHs against lefties now. And, who plays, I guess Hanley plays first base against righties. I mean, I don't want Travis coming up and playing in the short side of a platoon. Does he start in Pawtucket again? Do you go get another first baseman for a year? It's going to be very interesting to see what the Red Sox do with that position. While there's a question about Travis, and while there's, while Hanley Ramirez is still with the club, and maybe different, not the question I was referring to, but maybe we should get to Tyler Woodraw's question, Ian, on Twitter.
Yes.
Tyler Woodrow, who is a $5 level patron, and we appreciate that, Tyler, asked the question on Twitter, should the Red Sox move Chavis to first base so he could come to the majors? Thanks for the great show. Thank you, Tyler. We've touched a little bit on this the past couple of episodes, so we're not going to belabor the point. We'll just get right to it and answer the question. No, I don't think they should move him to first base. Moving a guy to first base is moving him all the way down to the bottom of the defensive spectrum. You move guys to first base who can't hack it at other positions. He's going to get exposure at first base in the Arizona Fall League, as we mentioned, but yeah, he's not a great fit there because of the height. We've talked about that too, but I don't want to limit him that way yet. And it's not like he's a guy who was beating the door down to the majors to end the year. He did kind of scuffle in Portland to end the year a little bit. I still have questions about how the bat plays at the major league level. This is not Rafael Devers. He hit 250, 310, 492 in Portland. Tons of pop. I think he kind of sells out all to the pull side to get the pop. I have questions about the approach. Maybe he was getting tired at the end of the year. That would be completely reasonable given that he was at by far the most plate appearances he's had in a season. He had, I guess, 471, well, maybe not by far. He had 471 plate appearances in Greenville in 2015. Last year he was at 339. This year he had 524 plate appearances. So he set a career high in plate appearances and in games played. I just, he's going to go to the Arizona Fall League too, and he'll get work at first base. I see him more as a guy who brings versatility than a guy who you slot in just at first base at this point, because I need to see him hit more in Portland, where I think he starts next year. I think he goes back there to start the year. And I want to see him hit in Pawtucket before he comes up, just because of the profile. This isn't, the Rafael Devers 6.5, maybe 7 on a good day hit tool. This is a 5 hit tool maybe.
Yeah, at best. He has to work on the making contact aspect, and he's got power, no doubt. I mean, we've seen it in BP. You know, it's impressive raw power, but if the hit tool doesn't develop, that power's not going to play. It doesn't matter. And there's no, you know, with him, he's got to develop the bat, but he has to develop the glove. And if you're looking at him as an internal solution, yeah, it might make sense to move him to first base. But as you alluded to, you don't want to do that until it's the last resort kind of move. And there's hope that he's still salvageable at third base or at another position. And especially if you view him as a trade chip, which the organization might, I'm not sure, then other teams are going to want to see him play third base. You know, he has more value if he's a third base prospect than he does as a first base prospect. So I would not move him full time to first base. Obviously, they're going to start exposing him to other positions, which makes sense. But at this point, juncture, I would still keep him primarily at third base. And yeah, we need to see. Like, I understand the numbers were really good this year. The power numbers jump off the page, and the Red Sox don't have guys with for power like that usually. But this is, as you alluded to, this is not the type of prospect that you're going to, you know, move mountains to get in the lineup soon. You know, he's still going to need time to develop, and I would not be surprised at all if he didn't make the majors until 2019, I guess, or no, 2019.
Well, I mean, I can't.
Like, I would not be surprised if he didn't make it up to the majors next year at all. So
I wouldn't be surprised, but I would project him too.
Yeah, it's 50-50 for me.
September call up. No,
I mean, they didn't call up Jalen Beeks this year, and Jalen Beeks is better than obviously it's apples to oranges comparing pitchers to hitters, but I mean, Beeks performed really well this year, and he's not getting called up, and they don't have to add him to the 40-man until after next season. So I'm not going to call him up, you know, unless I'm going to play him every day, and I just don't see that happening.
Well, Chavis, yeah. Well, no, Chavis has to get added after next season.
No, I know, so he doesn't have to be added.
But I'm saying if you're going to do it in November, why not do it in September?
I mean, but we said the same thing about Beeks, and they didn't do it.
I guess that's true.
So that's why. Yeah.
Fair point. Yeah, I mean, very good question. I don't see the need to do it yet. And I mean, I know there's also the questions. Well, what about his defense? It's not supposed to be good at third base. Well, yeah, that's why you play him there, so he can keep working.
Yeah.
You know, so he keeps working on it. So he's got things to work on. I wouldn't move mountains to get him up either. I think that's a good way to put it. Ian, before we get to the discussion of the other Twitter question we got and the guys we talked about in that context, any other movement in the rankings that you want to highlight? We mentioned Bryce Brentz jumping up to 22. Maybe we should mention Joan Martinez. I feel really validated on this one. Jumping up to, where did we wind up putting him? 34 or 35. He wound up coming in at 35 after his promotion from Lowell to Greenville and his success in Greenville. I had him much higher personally. I had him at 29 on my rankings. I think he's a top 30 prospect in the system easily, and I think he's kind of proving that with the past couple, week and a half he's had, where he's become Greenville's stopper in the bullpen. I don't know if he's technically their closer yet or not, but
he's closed out. He closed out both their wins in the playoffs.
He did. Okay,
actually, he didn't. Daniel Gonzalez closed out yesterday's game because he loaded the bases. But yeah.
Okay. Well, all right. Well, there is that, but
I would just say that I'm pretty sure he was someone I said in spring training. It wouldn't surprise me
if
by the season they were throwing like 99, and that's exactly what's happened.
Right.
It's just funny because I was just looking. Last season at Instructs, he was 91, 93. And now he's like 95, 97, 98, touched 99, 100. So quite the progression velocity-wise.
Yeah, sorry, you caught me taking a bit of sandwich.
Yeah, you did.
I did. Yeah, so, I mean, I like what he's done there. I mean, he had a big jump.
Throws hard.
Yeah. Castellanos moved up 6 spots. Williams-Jerez moved up a little bit.
It was a lot of, like, the young guys, because I think
all the young dudes.
This could lead into the next question, but
why don't you read it?
I kind of made the decision this month to just get rid of all, like, the kind of orky guys to the best of my abilities and just give me upside. And that's kind of what happened. And that's why I have a lot of guys like the Suarez's, Castellanos, Tyler Esplin, Nick Duran, guys like that. I had reasonably high. And we actually got a question on Twitter, as you alluded to, from Wide World of Sport, very active contributor to the community. And the question was, I need to find it now, of course.
Not a boy.
Oh, I favored it. That's where it is. The question was, next podcast, would love to hear some discussion of performance versus projection in ranking. It's more obvious when one in AAA versus high A or A ball, e.g. versus Brian Johnson versus Groom. But what would it take for Mata to pass Groom? So I think that's a pretty interesting discussion, especially because, I mean, it's the way we do the rankings. So for those who don't know, Chris, Mike, who is the founder of the site, and myself all submit top 70s, and we kind of we look at all those, create one master list, and then have discussions from there. And we all come in it from different, I would say, relatively different perspectives on how we rank. You know, we don't tell each other what should be the number one thing you're ranking on. And that's where the idea of projection versus performance comes into play. And I think there are some guys along the way who we diverge because of that. And, Mata is obviously someone who is more a projection guy who is also performing. So he's kind of made the job easier. But we've always had him pretty high this year, I would say, compared to people around, the prospect world, because we've seen him.
I would say we hit on that one.
Yeah, I mean, we've had him in our top 20 the entire season for a reason. But, I think as you move further down the list, it becomes more glaring. And someone I think that's a good example of that is someone like Nick Duran. You and I got into a pretty healthy discussion about him this year, because if you look at it, his numbers don't really stand out. With Lowell, he's thrown 53 innings this year, 3.35 ERA, 36 strikeouts, 16 walks, whip 110, which is pretty good. But yeah, and so it's nothing really that outstanding. But he was someone that I had, I think, even in the initial ones in the at number 40, and you and Mike had a little lower. And your point was, what was your point again? I can't find it. My computer's frozen right now.
Yeah, I'm going to find specifically what I said, because I want to make sure, because I was looking at numbers in part, and I think maybe I might have overstated my point a little bit. But what I said was, here's what I wrote. Duran is posting a 5.4 strikeout per nine rate in a down year for the New York Penn League. The walks aren't bad, and he gets ground balls, but he doesn't excite me. It's a straight fastball and two inconsistent secondaries, and his arm gets out ahead of his body. He may have more upside, but a much better chance of topping out at high A or double A than, say, Tate Matheny, who's probably at least a triple A outfielder. That said, while fixing your rankings, I said fixing your rankings because you had actually had him low.
Yeah, I screwed up.
You had screwed up because you called us out and had him lower than either of us. It was just
that was because I copied my list wrong when I was doing it,
which is fine.
The way I do it.
It was just funny because you would call this out, and it's like, yeah, you're the low guy on him, idiot. Yeah. You basically then said that you think I factor stats in far too much with him, and Justin Haley, who we'll talk about in a minute, and and you say you said you were factoring in upside. And then just to get the rest of my point out there, we don't rank just on upside, because if I were ranking Duran on just his stats, he would have been a non-prospect. He wouldn't have even been in my top 70. I had him at 48 myself. But the point I made, this isn't Anderson Espinosa with mediocre stats. He's 21 in a bad league with some velocity, and asked if I was missing something. But, with Duran and a guy like that, I need to see it a little bit. Show me something. I'm not saying he's got to dominate, but just give me something to work with. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree kind of, but I think of it, the lower you get down the list, the more I'm willing to take the chances on guys like that. And, Duran, I alluded to that he had not been focused fully on baseball, at first I thought it was, I didn't realize that, I thought he just started playing baseball, maybe it's senior year of high school or something, but it turned out he had played for a while. But he'd also been a football guy. And, when you're playing two sports, it's a little different versus focusing solely on baseball. And obviously he's had a very limited track record in his pro career. He threw, 20?
All state in high school.
Yeah, but he threw 20. No, I'm saying in his pro career, though, he threw 26 innings in 2015, didn't throw it all last year. So he hasn't thrown a lot. And I'm willing to take, I'm going to pump up someone who I've seen up to 96, who has just a really good pitcher's frame, and there's projection, and that you can tell they're still relatively raw on the mound. And I think that's kind of what leads to the low strikeout numbers.
And athletic. That's
very
important.
Super athletic. And, I'm going to take a chance on a guy like that. obviously I'm not going to put him in like my top 20 necessarily right now, but that's the type of player I want in my system. And I would rather have guys like that than kind of fringy. Maybe he'll put up good stats in the low minors, guys like Daniel Gonzalez, for example, or obviously that's not a great comparison, but I want to take the chance on the upside. And when I'm ranking, that's when I'm getting lower in the list, I'm going to factor more in projection than performance, especially, this early on. And just with Duran, he's someone who I think there is projection. I think there's upside. And that's why I was willing to, bump him up a little more, even though maybe his stats don't necessarily reflect that ranking.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, look, I think there's a difference between, I wasn't in here putting like Denny Reyes, who's kind of the new, the new version. You mentioned Daniel Gonzalez, and I think you were the one who actually said this earlier, that Denny Reyes is basically the new Daniel Gonzalez, a guy who throws strikes and has great numbers because of it. But
yeah, I didn't realize his numbers are insane.
His numbers are great, and they were great in the Dominican Summer League too.
But the thing is, he's like 85, 88, and
right.
There's just not a lot.
And if I were ranking Denny Reyes ahead of Duran, okay, yeah, that's crazy. You can't just rank based on numbers, right?
Yeah.
You can't, just say, oh, this guy had a great statistical season. You have to factor in knowing what a guy looks like or having seen the guy before you can really accurately talk about a guy like that. So, you do have to factor both things in. For me, I think what it comes back to, Ian, is what do you project the guy to be, and how much do you factor in the error bars for a guy and each one. Because if you look at projections on guys, there's kind of the, in the Baseball America Prospect Handbook, they give guys grades and they give them a number grade and then they like quantify it with a risk factor. So you can have a guy who's like a 65 high risk or a 55 low risk, and those guys will be ranked in the same tier of guys. That then, they're kind of ranked within that tier. Because while one guy has maybe a higher projection, there's a lot of risk. The way I tend to think of it is, okay, I project this guy most likely to be a roll 5 guy, say, okay? And a roll 5 guy is basically your kind of, your standard major league regular, okay? And the example we have on the website is Jed Lowry. For a pitcher, it's, a back-end starter like a Wade Miley. For a relief pitcher, it's a solid closer or an elite setup man, like a Koji Uehara is the example we have there that might need updating. If I project a guy like that, that's one thing, but it's like, what's the error bars? Is it a guy in the Gulf Coast League who it's incredible that he projects as a 5 right now, and if his development goes perfectly, he's a roll 6, maybe even a 7. Okay, usually we won't do that with a guy, but that's possible. Or is it a guy who's in Pawtucket who, projects as a 5, maybe not a 5. 5 is a bad example. Projects as a 4.5, 4.5, bench guy. Call him, let's say his name's, call him like a Marco Hernandez or a Devin Marrero type or something where like we pretty much know what he is. There's not a lot of room on the error bars there. He's not much less than that because he already kind of is an up and down guy, but he's not much more than that because we know he's not more than that. How do you compare those two? And to me, it's just, projection, likelihood of reaching that projection, right? How much of the span between the error bars is that projection? And, how much further up does the upside go into chances of reaching that? It's tough. Sometimes it's a gut thing. I don't know. I find myself using a gut a lot, ranking out to 60. It's just kind of like feel for a guy after doing this for a certain amount of time. I don't know.
No, and I think that's where I think it helps that we get a look at a lot of the guys. And, when you can tell pretty quickly with a lot of guys if they have it or they don't. And
for sure.
Like Mata was an example of that. He's someone who I was trying to see one of the first time. So we wrote our first thing about him was Instructs last year. And he was someone right as soon as I saw him in Instructs, it was like, ooh, okay, that's someone I want to watch. Or that's someone I'm going to, be kind of in the camp for. That's what I like to see. I want to see if I see a 17-year-old who has feel for, 3 pitches and a projectable frame. That's like really interesting to me. And the delivery works. But then you have other guys, that you can kind of tell the other way when you see it. And the thing that, as the question, kind of going back to the question, what makes it tough though is that it's when those things are confounding. Like, I think a guy who's a good example of that was, do you remember Chase-Yuan Chang?
Yeah, of course.
He was someone who I saw in Portland and I just didn't get it at all. I was like, I don't think this guy can hit, but the numbers were insane that year. What did he hit, like 340 with like 20 home runs or something before they traded him? And it was one of those things, when you see him live, it was just a lot of weak contact. He'd occasionally square up like a mistake pitch, but for the most part, he got challenged by velocity and he just didn't drive the ball at all.
Yeah, so Chase-Yuan Chang in 2011 in Portland hit 340, 402, 648.
Exactly.
18 home runs, 37 doubles in 88 games before he was traded to Seattle in the that would have been the Eric Bedard trade.
Yeah.
And immediately cratered. Immediately.
Yeah.
And I remember there was a narrative at the time that he was diabetic and they'd finally figured out, like...
Yeah, and then
how to handle it or something.
Yeah, I remember that. But it was just like, he was someone who, if you saw live, it was just like, really? And kind of a guy like that in the system now Tyler Hill's kind of like that for me. I like him more.
Or was last year when he had the year.
Last year. I mean, this year he had a decent year, but still, it's just, I just don't see it. Like, the stats are good, but he's not a great defensive outfielder. It's a left field only profile. There's not a lot of power. I mean, he can run a little bit, but I don't think the baseball instincts are necessarily there. And, we talked about it a lot last year when he was hitting like 330. And that's where it can be kind of tough, because it's like, well, what's deceiving you? Is it the stat line that's deceiving, or your eyes deceiving? And that's what can be kind of tough about this. Sometimes you just have to make a call. Not everyone's going to be easy. And so, yeah, I think just overall, I kind of evaluate it on a case-by-case basis. But at the same time, it helps to be able to go back and say, like, based on what you've seen in the past, or it's a lot easier when it's like, this guy looks like this. Going back, I've seen other players who looked similar. How have they developed, or what do they need to do? What are the boxes he needs to tick to perform? And that kind of helps me along the way when I'm trying to decide, is it, what am I relying on here? Is this a guy that, let's just go with projections, bump him up a little bit because of that, and the performance is good, I'm not sold on the projection, what do I go with there? So. Do
you want to go one more with Justin Haley?
I guess he was
a good example. Looking at the rankings, Mike had him at 26, I had him at 30, you had him at 42. And admittedly, you've seen him a lot more than I have. But with Haley, what I saw was a guy who a team felt strongly enough about that they took him in the Rule 5 draft. So we have some evidence of how other organizations feel about him. A guy who, I keep saying a guy, I feel like John Gruden, but I guess it is football season. Here's a guy, came back to the Red Sox after, this year in Minnesota. What happened is, to start the year, they used him in the Major League bullpen. It didn't really work. I think we knew it really wasn't going to work, to be perfectly honest. We kind of saw that one coming. And in the Major League bullpen, he didn't really succeed. Let's see here, where's Minnesota? Yeah, 10 appearances, finished 5 games. Somehow those must have been low-leverage situations. 18 innings, 22 hits, 6 walks, 14 Ks. Got hurt, which I'm sure was at least... I'm not going to say he wasn't injured at all, but, I'm sure it was at least in part a Rule 5 injury. And when he came back in AAA for Rochester, he was starting again. And he made 5 appearances, 4 of them starts for Rochester. And back in a more familiar role, had a lot more success. 17 hits, ERA of 4.15, but 3 walks to 11 Ks. And upon getting returned to Pawtucket, in 7 starts, put up a 2.66 ERA, 44 innings, 35 hits, 7 walks, 35 strikeouts. So whip below 1. Strikeouts still not that great, 7.2 per 9. Pretty good. Honestly, for the month of August, his numbers were really close to Jalen Beeks' numbers, except Beeks struck out more guys, which is not an insignificant difference. But that said, all of the other stats are pretty much lined up with Beeks's, and Beeks is a guy who we like. Maybe as a relief pitcher, but we like him. I just think Haley in this system he's a top 30 prospect for me, or he's a top 30 prospect. I had him right in there at 30. I liked him better than some of the guys in that area. I think in hindsight, I maybe regret putting him ahead of Ty Buttrey. I'd probably like to get that one back. But it's a guy who, at the very least, can start in AAA. I think he eventually becomes an up and down guy, and frankly, an up and down guy or a role 4.5, a role 4 guy is rankable in this system right now. There's not a ton of depth. It's coming back, and I think next year he's a guy who, even if he stays what he is, probably, falls back just because he hasn't progressed at all while guys behind him are progressing. But I just thought, for what I project him to be, basically even on what he is now, he's a guy who could come up and at least hold down a bullpen spot for you for a couple of weeks, and you wouldn't feel too terribly about it, I don't think. I don't know if he's even going to get a spot start in the majors, but who knows? He just wasn't a guy. I wouldn't say I was terribly excited about him, but he was a guy who I thought merited that ranking. You, on the other hand, were not impressed with what you saw from him.
No, it came down. I don't think there's any projection, and I don't think the stuff plays in a bullpen role. So he was like, if you dream, it's like a fringy up and down starter. And for me, I think he's more like an organizational arm. And I'm going to take the chance on the guys, some of the guys who I was trying to look at who some of the guys I had ahead of him.
Let me put it this way, is that I think he's a guy who, I keep saying that, I think Haley is a player who I don't think he's ever going to make a start for the Boston Red Sox. I could see him leaving as a minor league free agent and making spot starts for some other organization who's not in a pennant race. Does that make sense? Because you see these guys who kick around like Luis Mendoza, who the Red Sox traded at some point, who just never would have probably started with the Red Sox, but then you just keep seeing his name popped up, like, I forget with who he came up, but, so-and-so team has added this guy to the 40-man roster to make a couple of spot starts or to serve an emergency bullpen role or something. I feel like that's where Haley winds up popping up. I think that's why they're not going to protect him again this year. And actually, if he gets chosen in the Rule 5 draft again this year, even if the other team offers him back, he can or doesn't want him on the roster anymore, he can become a free agent. He doesn't get offered back to the Red Sox. That's what happened a few years back with Cesar Cabral when he got selected in 2 consecutive Rule 5 drafts. But I just think he's a guy who we might see kicking around the majors, and I think that's more than you can say for a lot of guys that will rank in that range. I think a lot of those guys are going to fall short, never make the majors, flame out at AAA, and just not get a shot. Whereas Haley has already pitched in the major leagues.
I mean, yeah, maybe, but I just there's some of them have the more projection, going back to the buzzword, and that was enough. Like guys like I had Duran ahead of him. I had someone like Yohan Martinez ahead of him. Granted, you had Martinez ahead of him also.
Yep.
Guys like, Trey Ball still, who has done nothing statistics-wise, really, in the high minors. But I just can't get away from it because I still it's super athletic. It's 6'6", and it's left-handed. And so it just was one of those things where I just didn't see the stuff playing in a bullpen role, and I just don't see as a starter for the Red Sox. So I'm willing to take the guys who have a little more projection because I just don't see any projection there. But
fair enough.
It's tough. I guess the other thing, do you know what would you say to the question of what would it take for Mata to pass Groom? Because do you have an answer?
Yeah, to that? It's a non-answer in that I would need to think that Mata projected to be a better pitcher than Groom. I think you would need both of their respective arsenals to step forward and backwards as necessary. Maybe Groom's body gets away from him a little bit. He's a big guy. Mata gains a tick or two on the fastball. But it would take a lot, even if Mata comes out next year in Salem and is shoving, and Groom repeats with Greenville and isn't pitching well.
It's just with Groom, it's just the upside's immense. If he figures it out, you're looking at like a 60 fastball, 70 curveball, and like a 55 changeup. And I don't see that Mata doesn't have any pitch as good as Groom's curveball, potentially. But the thing I was just thinking about is, if you ask me now who has the higher floor, I'd probably be tempted to say Mata at this point. It's close.
I don't think so. I mean, on the site, we have them ranked as follows. We have Groom and Mata both with 3 floors.
It's probably similar, but
we've
both,
got
Groom
Groom with a 7 ceiling, Mata with a 6 ceiling.
Which
Groom.
I think is fair. I don't see a 7 ceiling in Mata unless, as I said, or what I said earlier, where the stuff just takes a significant grade forward.
Yeah, so I think that has a lot to do with it. So the projection, if you look at Groom, his current projection's a 5.5, and we have Mata at a 5. I think Groom would have to take a step back where he's a 5, and Mata might even have to take a step forward, because if there's a tiebreaker, if they're both 5s, I'm taking Groom in the upside.
Yeah, I mean, but it's a good thing for the Red Sox that it's being even floated. That I don't think it's a discussion yet.
No, I don't think it is.
The idea that
it's realistic.
It's something that there's a few guys now. Obviously Devers is going to graduate, and the top of the system is going to be super thin. But they have some guys who have positioned themselves with big years next year that can maybe take that jump and, not just within the system, but get into the top 100 nationally. Because as of now, I would say Groom and maybe Chavis sneaks in the back end of a list or two.
Of the top 100?
Yeah.
Yeah, those are the only 3 top 100 guys. And like you said, Devers is going to graduate.
So, yeah, it's
what I will say, I think there's one pitcher who could pass Jay Groom next year in the system currently.
Taug?
Nope. Alex Scherf.
Oh, I don't know. I haven't seen him, so I don't know. I don't know anything about him.
Well, I mean, there's the mystery, right? We haven't seen the flaws yet. But, I mean, that's the only opportunity. And, the fact that we haven't seen him is probably part of why I think that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Scherf is a guy who got an early third-round bonus. Really wanted to turn pro. We've heard that, turning pro might be good for him, getting into camp, being in a professional baseball setting. He was a guy who transferred 3 times during high school. I could see Scherf maybe putting it all together, and I think, let me say this, I think it is more likely that Scherf passes Groom than that Mata passes Groom. I don't think either will. I would bet heavy money that neither of them will.
Yeah, I don't have any comment because I haven't seen Scherf, so right. I'll withhold judgment until then.
Fair enough. Okay, well, Ian, I think it's probably time to wrap this up. That was a good discussion. Thank you, everybody, for downloading again. Everybody in Florida, we're thinking of you. It's tough to kind of think about, your loved ones sitting in their pantry for, the evening, because it's the safest part of the house. So be safe, everybody down there in Florida. For Ian, I'm Chris. We'll be back at you with a probably shorter episode coming up. So we'll be back at you soon. After the green.
Sorry to ruin your segue.
Yeah.
That was mean. I should have let it go.
Be a professional, Ian.
Sorry.
No, we should. You're right. Let's mention it quickly. By the way, if I sound distracted at all, it's because Ian is moving his cursor around in the shared spreadsheet that we have, and I just see his little box moving around.
Yeah, let's do that.